The dust swirled like a devil's dance across the parched Kansas prairie as Beth Vaughn clutched her youngest child to her chest, her legs trembling beneath her skirts as she fought to remain standing. 6 other children huddled around her, their faces streaked with dirt and tears, their bellies as empty as the vast plains stretching before them. It was 1873, and the promised land of the West had shown them nothing but cruelty since her husband's passing 3 months prior. "Mama, I'm thirsty," whispered 4-year-old Emma, tugging at Beth's tattered skirt. Beth tried to smile, but her cracked lips could barely move. "I know, sweet one, we'll find water soon." The lie tasted bitter in her mouth. They hadn't found water since yesterday morning, and the last of their food had been divided among the children at dawn. Her own stomach had known nothing but emptiness for 2 days now. The hot summer sun beat down mercilessly as Beth squinted at the horizon, searching for any sign of the town she'd been told lay in this direction. But there was nothing, just endless prairie grass waving in the hot wind, mocking her with its rhythmic dance. "Just a little farther," she murmured, more to herself than to the children. 10-year-old James, her oldest, gave her a look that spoke volumes. Even he knew they were lost. Beth took another step forward and felt her knees buckle beneath her. The baby in her arms gave a weak cry as she sank to the ground, her strength finally deserting her completely. "Mama," cried 8-year-old Sarah, rushing to her side. "I just need to rest a moment," Beth whispered, though she wondered if she would ever rise again. The children gathered around her like frightened birds, their eyes wide with fear. It was then that the sound reached them, the steady rhythm of hoofbeats cutting through the silence of the plains. Beth raised her head, shielding her eyes from the sun with one hand as she searched for the source of the sound. A lone rider appeared on the horizon, the silhouette of man and horse merging into one dark shape against the bright sky. As he drew closer, Beth could make out a broad-brimmed hat and the lean figure of a cowboy atop a chestnut mare. "Mister," James shouted, waving his arms frantically. "Mister, help us!" The rider changed direction, heading straight for their pitiful group. Beth tried to stand, unwilling to appear so helpless before a stranger, but her legs refused to cooperate. "Stay behind me," she instructed the children weakly, unsure what protection she could offer them in her state. The horse slowed to a walk as it approached, and Beth got her first clear look at the rider. He was younger than she'd expected, perhaps 30 or so, with sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of a stormy sky. A week's worth of stubble covered his jaw and dust caked his clothes, but there was something reassuring in his steady gaze as he took in their situation. "Madam," he said, tipping his hat as he dismounted in one fluid motion. "Looks like you and your little ones are in a bad way." "We're fine," Beth said automatically, pride still flickering despite her desperate situation. "Just resting a moment." The man's eyes moved from her face to the baby in her arms, then to the 6 children huddled around her. His expression softened. "I'm Lucas Garrison," he said. "I'm heading to Willow Creek. That where you're bound?" Beth nodded weakly. "Yes, they say there's work there. I'm Beth Vaughn. These are my children." She didn't have the strength to introduce them all. Lucas crouched down beside her, offering his canteen. "Drink, madam, then the children." "Not too fast now." Beth's hands shook so badly she nearly spilled the precious water. Lucas steadied the canteen, his calloused fingers brushing against hers. The water was warm but felt like heaven against her parched throat. After each child had taken a careful drink, Lucas surveyed their situation. "Willow Creek's still 15 miles northeast. You won't make it on foot, especially not in this heat." Beth closed her eyes against the crushing wave of despair. 15 miles might as well have been 1,000. "I can take you," Lucas said simply. Beth's eyes flew open. "All of us? How?" "My horse can carry you and the baby. The older ones can take turns riding double with me. The rest can hold onto the stirrup leathers and walk alongside. We'll go slow, take breaks. Better than staying out here." "Why would you help us? You don't know us." Lucas's weathered face creased into a slight smile. "Out here, madam, we help when help's needed, No more reason than that. Before Beth could protest further, Lucas was helping the children to their feet, giving each a small piece of jerky from his saddlebag. When he turned to Beth, his expression grew serious. "You're too weak to stand," he observed, not unkindly. Beth felt a flush of embarrassment color her cheeks. "I just need a moment." Lucas shook his head. "No shame in needing help, Mrs. Vaughn." Without further discussion, he bent down and lifted her in his arms, the baby still clutched to her chest. Beth was too exhausted to protest as he placed her gently on his horse. "James," Lucas called to her oldest, "you walk on this side and keep an eye on your mama and the little one. Sarah, you take the other stirrup. The rest of you stay close." With practiced ease, Lucas mounted behind Beth, his arms encircling her to reach the reins. "Lean back if you need to, madam," he said, his voice low near her ear. "I won't let you fall." As the horse began to move, Beth found herself doing just that, her body too exhausted to remain upright. Her head rested against Lucas's chest, the steady beat of his heart a reassuring rhythm as they began the long journey to Willow Creek. The sun was low in the western sky when they reached the outskirts of town. Beth had dozed off several times during the journey, waking each time to find herself securely held in Lucas's strong arms. The children had taken turns riding, though James had stubbornly insisted on walking the entire way, his young face set with determination to prove his strength. Willow Creek was larger than Beth had expected, a proper town with wooden sidewalks, a general store, a church with a white steeple, and several saloons lining the main street. People stopped to stare as Lucas guided his horse down the center of town, the strange procession drawing curious glances. "Where were you planning to stay?" Lucas asked as they approached the town square. Beth felt a lump form in her throat. I don't know. I thought perhaps there might be a boarding house that would take us until I found work." Lucas was silent for a moment. "There's Mrs. Holbrook's place. She takes in boarders, but it won't come cheap, and she might not have room for all of you." "I have a little money," Beth said, though the few coins in her purse wouldn't last more than a night or two. Lucas guided the horse toward a modest two-story building at the end of the main street. "Let me talk to her. Mrs. Holbrook can be particular about who she takes in, but she's fair." Mrs. Holbrook proved to be a stern-faced woman in her 60s, her gray hair pulled into a tight bun. She eyed Beth and her brood with obvious skepticism. 7 children. She said, arms crossed over her ample bosom. "I don't know, Mr. Garrison, that's a lot of little ones to be running around my establishment." "They're well behaved," Lucas assured her, "and Mrs. Vaughn is looking for work. She just needs a place until she gets settled." Mrs. Holbrook's sharp eyes assessed Beth. "What sort of work are you hoping to find, Mrs. Vaughn?" Beth straightened her shoulders despite her exhaustion. "I can cook, clean, so I kept the books for my husband's farm. I'm not afraid of hard work, madam." Something in Mrs. Holbrook's expression softened slightly. "Well, I suppose I could use some help around here. The rooms and board in exchange for your work, at least until something better comes along. But those children will have to earn their keep too, the older ones at least." Beth felt tears of relief sting her eyes. "Thank you, Mrs. Holbrook. We won't disappoint you." After they had settled in the boys in one small attic room, Beth and the girls in another, Lucas prepared to take his leave. Beth followed him to the porch, the baby still in her arms. "I don't know how to thank you, Mr. Garrison," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You saved our lives today." Lucas shifted uncomfortably, his hat in his hands. "Anyone would have done the same." "No," Beth said softly, "not anyone. You're a good man, Lucas Garrison." A touch of color appeared on his tan cheeks. "I'm staying at the Silver Dollar Hotel for a few days," he said. "If you need anything, you can find me there." Beth nodded. "God bless you for your kindness." As she watched him walk away, Beth felt a strange mixture of gratitude and loss. In the span of a single day, this stranger had become her family's salvation, and now he was walking out of their lives as suddenly as he had appeared. "Mama, I'm hungry," said 6-year-old Daniel, tugging at her skirt. Beth turned back to the boarding house, pushing away thoughts of the kind cowboy. She had her children to think of now and a new life to build. There was no time for anything else. The next morning, Beth rose before dawn to begin her duties at the boarding house. Mrs. Holbrook was a demanding employer, but fair, and the work was no harder than what Beth had been accustomed to on the farm. By midday, she had helped prepare and serve breakfast, cleaned the common areas, and started on the laundry. James and Sarah had been put to work as well, James chopping wood and carrying water, Sarah helping with the younger children. It was while hanging sheets in the backyard that Beth spotted Lucas crossing the street toward the general store. Before she could decide whether to call out to him, he turned and caught sight of her. With a small smile, he changed direction and headed toward the fence that separated the boarding house property from the alley. "Good morning, Mrs. Vaughn," he said, tipping his hat. "I see Mrs. Holbrook has put you to work already." Beth tucked a stray lock of hair behind her ear, suddenly conscious of her disheveled appearance. "It's good to be useful again," she said. "How are you today, Mr. Garrison?" "Can't complain." His eyes moved to the sheets billowing in the breeze. "The children settling in all right?" "Yes, thank you. Mrs. Holbrook even found some old clothes that might fit the younger ones." Lucas nodded, seeming pleased. "I'm glad to hear it. I was wondering if there's anything else you might need. I'm heading to the general store now." Beth felt a flush of embarrassment. She didn't want to appear needy, but the truth was they had very little. "That's very kind, but we're managing." Lucas's eyes held hers for a moment, and she had the uncomfortable feeling that he could see right through her brave front. "Well, if you think of anything, let me know." He turned to go, then stopped. "Actually, Mrs. Vaughn, I was wondering if you and the children might join me for supper tonight at the hotel restaurant. They serve a good meal there." Beth was taken aback by the invitation. "That's very generous, but I couldn't impose further. It's no imposition," he interrupted gently. "Truth is, I've been eating alone for too long. Some company would be welcome." Beth hesitated, torn between pride and practicality. A good meal would do the children a world of good. "If you're certain." "I am." His smile reached his eyes this time, crinkling the corners. 6 o'clock, we'll be there," Beth said, returning his smile. "And thank you." As Lucas walked away, Mrs. Holbrook appeared in the doorway, her sharp eyes taking in the scene. "That cowboy seems to have taken quite an interest in you and your brood," she observed, her tone neutral. Beth felt her cheeks warm. "He's just being kind." Mrs. Holbrook made a non-committal sound. "Lucas Garrison's a good man, been coming through Willow Creek regular for years. Works for the Rocking T Ranch up north. Drives cattle to the railroad a couple times a year." "Oh," Beth said, unsure how to respond. "He's invited us to supper at the hotel tonight." Mrs. Holbrook nodded. "You should go. Those children could use a good meal, and you could use a friend in town." She paused, then added, "You can have the evening off. Just make sure those sheets are hung before you go." That evening, Beth dressed the children in their cleanest clothes, which wasn't saying much. She used a bit of water to slick down the boys' hair and tied ribbons from her own sewing kit in the girls' hair. For herself, she had only the dress she'd been wearing when Lucas found them, now washed and mended as best she could. "Remember your manners," she reminded them as they walked the short distance to the Silver Dollar Hotel. "Mr. Garrison is being very kind to invite us." The hotel restaurant was the fanciest establishment the children had ever seen, with tablecloths and real napkins at each place. Lucas was waiting for them near the entrance, and Beth was struck by the change in his appearance. He had shaved, his dark hair was neatly combed, and he wore a clean shirt under his vest. He looked younger without the trail, dust, and stubble, and decidedly handsome. "Mrs. Vaughn," he said, coming forward to greet them. "Children, I'm glad you could come." He had arranged for a large table in the corner, away from the curious stares of the other diners. The children's eyes widened at the sight of the bread basket already on the table. "Please help yourselves," Lucas said, noticing their hungry looks. As the meal progressed, roast beef with potatoes and gravy, fresh vegetables, and apple pie for dessert, Beth watched in amazement as Lucas effortlessly engaged with each of her children. He asked 10-year-old James about his interests, listened patiently to 8-year-old Sarah's detailed description of her doll's imaginary adventures, and even managed to coax a smile from shy 6-year-old Daniel with a simple coin trick. 4-year-old Emma and 3-year-old twins Michael and Mary were won over by his willingness to cut their meat into tiny pieces, while baby Abigail, just 9 months old, contentedly chewed on a crust of bread in Beth's lap. "You're good with children," Beth observed when there was a lull in the conversation. Lucas looked slightly embarrassed. "Had a lot of younger brothers and sisters growing up, 8 of us in all." 8, Beth couldn't hide her surprise. "So you understand what it's like." "Some," he admitted. "Though my ma had my pa to help, you're doing it all on your own. That takes courage." Beth looked down at her plate, uncomfortable with the praise. "Not courage, necessity." "Still," Lucas insisted, "not everyone would have made it this far. You're strong, Beth Vaughn, stronger than you know." It was the first time he had used her first name, and something about the way he said it made her heart beat a little faster. She was saved from having to respond by Emma spilling her milk, creating a momentary distraction as napkins were deployed to mop up the mess. As they walked back to the boarding house after the meal, the children ran ahead, their spirits lifted by full bellies and the treat of an evening out. Lucas walked beside Beth, who carried a sleeping Abigail. "Thank you for the meal," Beth said softly. "It meant a lot to them, to me as well." "It was my pleasure," Lucas replied. After a moment of silence, he added, "I'll be leaving town in a couple of days, heading back to the ranch." Beth felt an unexpected pang of disappointment. "Oh, well, we certainly won't forget your kindness." Lucas stopped walking, turning to face her. "Mrs. Vaughn, Beth, I was wondering if I might call on you when I'm next in town. Should be in about a month's time." Beth was startled by the request. "Call on me?" "Yes, madam." There was that touch of color on his cheeks again. "I've enjoyed your company, and the children's too, of course." Beth didn't know what to say. It had been just 3 months since William's death, and the idea of another man's interest seemed somehow disloyal. Yet there was something about Lucas Garrison that made her feel safe, something she hadn't felt since long before William's passing. "I think I'd like that," she said finally, surprising herself with the admission. The smile that broke across his face was like sunrise over the prairie. "Good, that's good." They had reached the boarding house and the children were already climbing the steps to the porch. "Well," Lucas said, suddenly awkward, "good night then, Mrs. Vaughn." "Good night, Mr. Garrison," Beth replied, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "And thank you again." As she watched him walk away, Beth felt a flutter of something she hadn't experienced in years, a sense of possibility, of a future that might hold more than mere survival. She quickly pushed the feeling aside as she herded the children inside. There was no time for such thoughts. Not yet. The next morning, a package arrived at the boarding house for Beth. Inside was a bolt of sturdy cotton fabric, a smaller length of calico print, thread, buttons, and needles. A note accompanied the gifts. "Mrs. Vaughn, please accept these small tokens for you and the children. I noticed the little ones could use some new clothes. I hope this helps. Respectfully, L. Garrison." Beth ran her fingers over the fabric, touched by the thoughtfulness of the gift. Mrs. Holbrook, looking over her shoulder, gave a small nod of approval. "Like I said, a good man," she commented. "And he's right, those children do need clothes." "I'll start sewing tonight," Beth said, already planning how to make the fabric stretch to cover as many needs as possible. "You can use the sewing room upstairs," Mrs. Holbrook offered. "There's a machine in there that'll make the work go faster." True to his word, Lucas departed Willow Creek 2 days later. Beth had caught glimpses of him in town during those days, but their paths hadn't crossed directly again. She told herself it was for the best. She had no business thinking about a man when her children needed her full attention. The weeks passed, and Beth settled into life in Willow Creek. Mrs. Holbrook's temporary arrangement became more permanent as Beth proved her worth around the boarding house. The older children began attending the local school, and Beth's excellent cooking became a selling point for the establishment, bringing in new boarders. One rainy afternoon in late September, Beth was kneading bread dough in the kitchen when Mrs. Holbrook entered, a knowing look on her face. "You have a visitor, Mrs. Vaughn," she announced. Beth wiped her hands on her apron, puzzled. She hadn't made any acquaintances in town beyond the most casual of greetings. The answer was waiting in the front parlor, hat in hands, looking slightly uncomfortable among Mrs. Holbrook's fussy furnishings. Lucas Garrison had returned as promised. "Mr. Garrison," Beth said, unable to keep the surprise from her voice. "You're back in town." "Yes, madam." His eyes took in the flour dusting her apron, the loose strands of hair framing her face. "I hope I'm not interrupting." "Not at all, just preparing tomorrow's bread." She gestured to a chair. "Please sit down." Lucas remained standing. "Actually, I was hoping you might accompany me on a walk, if you can spare the time." Beth hesitated, looking down at her flour-covered apron. "Go on," Mrs. Holbrook urged from the doorway. "That dough needs to rise anyway. Get some fresh air." With a grateful smile, Beth untied her apron. "Give me a moment to tidy up." 10 minutes later, she joined Lucas outside, having hastily washed her face and hands and changed into her second-best dress, the one she'd made from the fabric he had given her. A fact that didn't escape his notice. "That fabric suits you," he commented as they began walking toward the town square. Beth felt herself blush. "Thank you again for your generosity. It's made a world of difference for the children." They walked in comfortable silence for a few moments before Lucas spoke again. "How are you settling in?" "Truly," Beth considered the question, "better than I expected. Mrs. Holbrook has been kind in her way. The children are in school now, except for the little ones, of course, and I'm earning enough to put a little aside each week." "You've made a home here," Lucas observed. "We're trying to." Beth looked up at him. "And you, how is life at the ranch?" Lucas shrugged. "Same as always. Cattle need tending no matter the season, but it's good work." He paused, then added, "I've been thinking about you and the children, wondering how you were faring." The simple admission warmed Beth more than it should have. "That's kind of you." They had reached the town square, where a small park offered benches under elm trees just beginning to turn golden with autumn. Lucas guided them to a bench somewhat removed from the others. "I brought something for the children," he said, reaching into his coat pocket and producing a small paper bag. "Peppermint sticks from the general store. Hope that's all right." Beth smiled. "They'll be delighted. You're spoiling them, Mr. Garrison." "Lucas," he corrected gently. "I think we know each other well enough for first names, don't you?" "Lucas," Beth repeated, testing the name, "and you should call me Beth." Lucas nodded, seeming pleased. "Beth." He looked out across the square where several children were playing with hoops. "I meant what I said before I left. I'd like to call on you properly, if you're willing." Beth felt her heart quicken. "Lucas, I'm a widow with 7 children. I have nothing to offer a man like you." "A man like me." His eyes crinkled at the corners. "What sort of man do you think I am?" "A good one," Beth said simply. "Kind. Hard-working. You could have any young woman in the territory, someone without so much complication." Lucas was quiet for a moment. "I'm 34 years old, Beth. Been on my own since I was 18. Never found a woman who made me think twice about my solitary life." He turned to face her directly. "Until I saw you fighting to keep your children alive on that prairie. Your strength, your dignity, even in the worst circumstances, it moved something in me." Beth didn't know how to respond. The intensity in his gray eyes made it difficult to breathe. "I know it's soon," he continued. "I know you're still grieving your husband. I'm not asking for promises, just a chance to get to know you better, to be a friend to you and the children." "The children," Beth repeated softly. "They've already lost so much. I can't let them become attached to someone who might not stay." "I understand your caution," Lucas said, "but I'm not a man who makes offers lightly. When I commit to something or someone, I see it through." A slight breeze ruffled the leaves above them, sending a shower of golden elm leaves spiraling down around them. One landed in Beth's hair, and without thinking, Lucas reached out to remove it, his fingers brushing against her temple. Beth felt the touch like a jolt through her body, and she drew in a sharp breath. Lucas withdrew his hand quickly. "I'm sorry." "No," Beth said, surprising herself. "Don't be sorry." For a long moment they simply looked at each other, something unspoken passing between them. Finally, Beth broke the silence. "I think," she said carefully, "that I would like it very much if you called on us while you're in town. The children ask about you, you know, especially James. He's quite taken with the idea of becoming a cowboy." Lucas's face broke into a genuine smile. "I'd be happy to tell him about ranch life, though his mama might have other ideas for his future." "His mama wants him to be happy," Beth said, "whatever path that takes." They spent another hour walking around town, Lucas pointing out places of interest and introducing Beth to shopkeepers he knew. By the time they returned to the boarding house, the children were home from school, and their excitement at seeing Lucas and receiving the promised candy was infectious. Over the next few days, Lucas became a regular visitor at the boarding house. He took James fishing at the creek that gave the town its name, helped Daniel build a small wooden horse, and even sat patiently while the girls decorated his hat with wildflowers, though he removed them before venturing back into town. Beth watched these interactions with a mixture of joy and trepidation, seeing how easily her children were becoming attached to this kind, patient man. On the evening before Lucas was to leave town again, he asked Beth to walk with him after supper. Mrs. Holbrook, who had observed the developing relationship with silent approval, volunteered to watch the children. They walked to the edge of town, where the buildings gave way to open prairie. The sunset painted the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, and a cool autumn breeze carried the scent of distant rain. "I'll be back in November," Lucas said as they watched the colors deepen in the western sky. "We're bringing another herd to the railroad." Beth nodded, trying not to show her disappointment at his departure. "The children will look forward to it. And you?" Lucas asked, his voice low. "Will you look forward to it too?" Beth met his gaze steadily. "Yes," she admitted. "I will." Lucas reached out slowly and took her hand in his. His palm was rough with calluses, but his touch was gentle. "I've never felt about anyone the way I feel about you, Beth. I know it's fast, and I know you have your children to think of, but I want you to know my intentions are serious." Beth looked down at their joined hands. "Lucas, I was married for 11 years. The last few weren't happy. William changed after the war, became bitter angry. He provided for us, but there was little kindness left in him." She hadn't meant to reveal so much, but something about Lucas made her want to be honest. "I'm afraid I've forgotten how to be anything but a mother and a housekeeper." Lucas's hand tightened around hers. "You're so much more than that. You're brave and strong and beautiful. And if you'll give me the chance, I'd like to remind you of all the things you can be." He paused, then added, "No rush, no pressure, just a promise that I'll return and we'll see where this leads us." Beth felt tears prick at her eyes. "I think I'd like that very much." In the fading light, Lucas raised her hand to his lips and pressed a gentle kiss to her knuckles. "Then that's what we'll do." The following morning, Lucas departed for the Rocking T Ranch, leaving Beth with a sense of anticipation she hadn't felt in years. Life continued in its busy routine, caring for the children, working at the boarding house, making plans for the coming winter, but now there was something else to look forward to as well. November brought colder weather and Lucas's return to Willow Creek. This time he stayed for nearly 2 weeks, and his visits to the boarding house became a daily occurrence. He brought small gifts for the children, a wooden top for Daniel, hair ribbons for the girls, a pocket knife for James and for Beth, a beautiful woolen shawl in deep blue. "To keep you warm," he said as she admired the soft fabric. "It's beautiful," Beth murmured, wrapping it around her shoulders, "but you shouldn't spend your money on me." "Who better?" Lucas replied simply. On Thanksgiving Day, Lucas joined them for dinner at the boarding house. Mrs. Holbrook had prepared a feast, and several other boarders gathered around the large dining room table. As Beth looked around at her children's happy faces and caught Lucas's warm gaze from across the table, she felt a surge of gratitude so powerful it brought tears to her eyes. Later, after the children had been put to bed, Beth and Lucas sat on the porch swing despite the cold, her new shawl wrapped tightly around her shoulders. "I received a letter from the ranch owner today," Lucas said, breaking a comfortable silence. "He's offered me a promotion of sorts. Wants me to manage a new section of the ranch he's developing." "That's wonderful," Beth said, genuinely pleased for him. "It would mean more responsibility, better pay." Lucas looked at her intently. "My own house on the property." Beth felt her pulse quicken at the implication. "That sounds like a fine opportunity." "It is," Lucas agreed, "but it's a big decision, not one I want to make alone." Beth's throat felt suddenly dry. "What are you saying, Lucas?" He took her hands in his. "I'm saying that I love you, Beth Vaughn. I love your children too. And I'm asking if you would consider becoming my wife." Though she had begun to suspect his feelings ran in this direction, the actual proposal still took her breath away. "Lucas, are you certain? 7 children is a lot to take on." "I've never been more certain of anything in my life," he said firmly. "Those children need a father, you need a husband who will cherish you the way you deserve, and I need all of you to make my life complete." Tears spilled onto Beth's cheeks. "I never thought I would find love again. Never thought I deserved it." "You deserve every happiness," Lucas whispered, reaching up to brush away her tears. "Say you'll marry me, Beth. Say you'll let me spend my life showing you how much I love you." "Yes," Beth said, her voice trembling with emotion. "Yes, I'll marry you." Lucas's face broke into a radiant smile. Slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished, he leaned forward and pressed his lips to hers in a gentle kiss. Beth felt herself melting into him, all her doubts and fears momentarily forgotten in the warmth of his embrace. When they finally parted, Lucas rested his forehead against hers. "We should tell the children tomorrow," he said. "If that's all right with you." Beth nodded, happiness bubbling up inside her like a spring. "They'll be overjoyed, especially James. He already looks at you like you hung the moon." Lucas chuckled. "That boy's going to make a fine rancher someday, if that's what he wants." "What about Mrs. Holbrook?" Beth asked suddenly. "I've committed to working here. I can't just leave her without help." "We'll figure it out," Lucas assured her. "Maybe we can find someone to take your place. Or perhaps we won't move to the ranch right away. There's no rush, Beth. We have time to make plans." The next morning, Beth gathered the children in their small room upstairs before breakfast. "I have something important to tell you all," she began, looking at each face in turn. "Mr. Garrison has asked me to marry him, and I've said yes." There was a moment of stunned silence, then an eruption of questions and exclamations. "Does that mean he'll be our new pa?" asked Sarah, her eyes wide. "Yes," Beth said, watching her daughter carefully for her reaction. Sarah's face broke into a smile. "Good, I like him." "Me too," chimed in Daniel. "He makes you smile, Mama." James was quiet, his expression thoughtful. "Will we move to his ranch?" he asked finally. "Eventually, yes," Beth confirmed. "We'd have our own house there." A slow smile spread across James's face. "I could learn to be a real cowboy, if that's what you want," Beth agreed. "But school comes first." Only Emma seemed uncertain, her lower lip trembling slightly. "But what about Papa? Won't he be sad if you marry someone else?" Beth gathered her daughter into her arms. "Your Papa would want us to be happy," she said gently. "He wouldn't want Mama to be alone forever, and I think he would like Lucas very much." Emma considered this, then nodded solemnly. "Can I call him Papa too?" "That's something you and Lucas will need to decide together," Beth said. "But I think he would be honored." The twins and baby Abigail were too young to fully understand what was happening, but they picked up on the excitement of their older siblings. By the time Lucas arrived for breakfast, all 7 children were buzzing with the news. Mrs. Holbrook, who had overheard everything, the walls of the old boarding house being notoriously thin, greeted Lucas with uncharacteristic warmth. "About time you made an honest woman of her," she said gruffly. "Though I'll be sorry to lose my best helper." Lucas grinned. "Thank you, Mrs. Holbrook, and don't worry, we won't leave you in the lurch." True to his word, Lucas and Beth took their time with the transition. They were married in the Willow Creek Church 2 weeks before Christmas. A simple ceremony with the children, Mrs. Holbrook, and a few townspeople in attendance. Lucas had to return to the ranch after the new year, but they agreed that Beth and the children would remain at the boarding house until spring, giving them time to prepare for the move and for Mrs. Holbrook to find a replacement. The separation was difficult, but Lucas rode into town as often as he could, staying for a few days at a time before returning to his duties at the ranch. Each reunion was sweeter than the last, as husband and wife grew to know each other better, and the children became increasingly comfortable with their new father. By April, everything was in place for the move. Lucas had spent the winter preparing their house on the ranch, a modest but comfortable 4-bedroom structure with a wide porch and plenty of room for the family to grow. Beth had saved enough from her work at the boarding house to buy new bedding and kitchen supplies, while Lucas had arranged for furniture to be built by the ranch carpenter. The day of departure arrived with clear skies and mild temperatures, perfect traveling weather. Lucas had brought a wagon for their belongings and another for Beth and the younger children. James would ride beside Lucas on a pony the rancher had brought specially for him, his first horse, as they loaded the last of their possessions. Mrs. Holbrook emerged from the boarding house with a large basket covered with a cloth. "Food for the journey," she said gruffly, handing it to Beth. "And this." She pressed a small package into Beth's hands, "a little something to remember your time here." Beth unwrapped the package to find a beautiful handmade quilt crafted from scraps of fabric she recognized from around the boarding house. "Mrs. Holbrook, it's beautiful, thank you," the older woman sniffed, blinking rapidly. "Well, you were the best help I ever had. And those children brought some life to this old place." She straightened her shoulders. "You take good care of them, Lucas Garrison." "Yes, madam," Lucas said solemnly. "I will." The journey to the Rocking T Ranch took 2 days with an overnight camp along the trail. Beth marveled at how different this journey was from the desperate trek that had brought them to Willow Creek less than a year ago. Now, instead of hunger and fear, there was anticipation and hope. Instead of being alone, she had a husband who treated her with tenderness and respect, who looked at her children as treasures rather than burdens. As they crested the final hill and the ranch came into view in the valley below, Lucas reined in his horse and waited for Beth's wagon to pull alongside. "Welcome home," he said, his eyes shining with emotion. Beth reached across to take his hand, her heart so full she could barely speak. "Home," she repeated softly. The ranch sprawled across the valley, a collection of buildings centered around the main house, with corrals, a barn, bunkhouses, and various outbuildings creating a small community. Beyond these structures stretched acres of grazing land, dotted with cattle and bordered by distant hills. It was beautiful in its rugged way, and Beth could already imagine her children growing up here, running free under the wide Montana sky. As they approached, several ranch hands emerged from the various buildings, curious about the new arrivals. Lucas had told them about his marriage, of course, but Beth suspected that the reality of 7 children might come as something of a shock. "That's Mr. Turner," Lucas said, pointing to an older man standing on the porch of the main house. "The ranch owner, he's eager to meet you." Horace Turner proved to be a jovial man in his 60s with a shock of white hair and twinkling blue eyes. He welcomed Beth and the children warmly, insisting they join him for dinner at the main house before settling into their own home. "Lucas has talked of nothing else but you and these young ones for months," Turner confided to Beth as they walked toward the house. "Never seen a man so besotted. And I can see why," he winked at her. "You've brought some much-needed feminine influence to this place." Dinner was a boisterous affair, with the ranch cook pulling out all the stops to impress the new arrivals. The children, initially shy, soon warmed up to Mr. Turner, who entertained them with stories of ranch life and promised James a tour of the entire property the next day. Finally, as the sun began to set, Lucas led his new family to their home. It sat about a quarter mile from the main house, nestled against a small copse of trees with a creek running nearby. The white painted clapboard gleamed in the evening light, with blue shutters framing the windows and a swing hanging from the porch rafters. "Oh, Lucas," Beth breathed as they approached. "It's perfect." Inside was just as welcoming. Simple but well-crafted furniture filled the rooms, with colorful rag rugs on the pine floors and curtains at the windows. Lucas had arranged for 3 bedrooms for the children, one for James, one for the girls, and one for the younger boys, plus a master bedroom for him and Beth. The kitchen was large and airy, with a new cookstove and a pine table big enough to seat them all. "Do you like it?" Lucas asked, a touch of anxiety in his voice as Beth walked slowly through the rooms. "Like it?" "Lucas, I love it." Beth turned to him, her eyes shining. "I never dreamed we could have a home like this." As the children explored their new rooms, exclaiming over the small touches, Lucas had included for each of them a bookshelf for Sarah, who loved to read, a rocking horse for Daniel, a cradle for Abigail. Beth felt overwhelmed by the thoughtfulness her husband had shown. Later, after the children were finally asleep in their new beds, exhausted from the journey and the excitement, Beth and Lucas sat on the porch swing, looking up at the vast canopy of stars. "Are you happy, Beth?" Lucas asked, his arm around her shoulders. Beth leaned her head against him, feeling the steady beat of his heart. "Happier than I ever thought possible," she said truthfully. "You've given us so much, Lucas. You've given me more," he replied, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "A family, love, purpose. I was just existing before I found you on that prairie. Now I'm truly living." Beth tilted her face up to his, and Lucas lowered his head to capture her lips in a tender kiss that slowly deepened, expressing all the love and promise they felt for each other. As spring turned to summer, the Garrison family settled into life on the Rocking T Ranch. Beth's skills as a homemaker and her experience managing a household made the transition easier than it might have been. The children thrived in their new environment, James following Lucas around the ranch whenever permitted, Sarah helping Beth with the household and discovering a talent for working with the kitchen garden, Daniel becoming the unofficial mascot of the ranch hands, who taught him to lasso and ride. Even the younger ones found their places, with Emmer revealing an affinity for the chickens and other small animals, the twins becoming inseparable from a pair of ranch dogs, and Abigail taking her first steps in the yard under the watchful eyes of her siblings. Beth found herself welcomed by the small community of ranch wives and female workers. Though the nearest town was a half-day's ride away, there were enough families at the various ranches in the area to form a loose social circle. They gathered for quilting bees, barn dances, and the occasional church service held in the main house at Rocking T. Lucas proved to be an exceptional husband and father. Patient with the children, attentive to Beth, and hardworking in his duties at the ranch, he seemed to have an endless supply of energy and good humor. Beth sometimes caught him watching her with a look of wonder, as though he couldn't quite believe his good fortune. "What are you thinking?" she asked one evening as they sat on the porch after the children were asleep. "I'm thinking about that day I found you," Lucas said, his voice soft with memory. "How close I came to taking a different trail. If I had, we might never have met." Beth shuddered at the thought. "I don't like to think about that. We were in such a desperate state." "But you would have kept going," Lucas said with certainty. "That's who you are, Beth. You never give up." "Perhaps," Beth said, "but I'm grateful every day that we didn't have to find out." She paused, then added, "I think it was meant to be, Lucas. You and me, this family we're building together." Lucas's arm tightened around her. "I believe that too." As autumn approached, Beth discovered she was expecting a child their first together. When she shared the news with Lucas, his face lit up with such joy that it brought tears to her eyes. "Another little one to love," he said, gathering her in his arms. "Are you happy about it?" "Very," Beth assured him, "though 8 children will be quite a brood." Lucas laughed, his hand gently resting on her still flat stomach. This ranch has plenty of room for as many children as God sees fit to bless us with." Telling the children about the coming baby brought a range of reactions: excitement from the girls, casual acceptance from James, who was now 11 and trying to be grown up, and confusion from the younger boys, who didn't quite understand where babies came from. 4-year-old Emma had the most pressing question. "Will you love the new baby more because it's yours and Papa Lucas's?" she asked, her small face serious. Beth and Lucas exchanged a look of surprise. It was Lucas who answered, kneeling down to Emma's level. "Emma, honey, you and your brothers and sisters are mine now just as much as this new baby will be," he said gently. "I couldn't love any of you more or less than the others. That's not how love works. When this new baby comes, it won't take any love away from you, it will just add more love to our family." Emma considered this, then nodded solemnly. "Okay, can I help take care of it?" "Of course you can," Beth assured her. "You'll be a wonderful big sister." Spring brought new life to the ranch calves in the pastures, wildflowers on the hillsides, and in early May, a healthy baby boy whom they named William Lucas Garrison, in honor of both Beth's first husband and her second. Little Will, as they called him, had Lucas's gray eyes and a dusting of dark hair, but Beth thought she could see her own father in the shape of his nose and chin. "He's perfect," Lucas whispered, holding his son for the first time, "just like his mother." The other children crowded around, eager to see their new brother. Even James, who had initially been the most reserved about welcoming Lucas into their family, was clearly enchanted by the tiny newcomer. "Can I hold him?" he asked, his voice cracking slightly, a sign of his approaching adolescence. "Of course," Beth said, watching proudly as Lucas carefully placed the baby in James's arms, showing him how to support the head. As Beth looked around at her family, her 7 children from her first marriage, her new son, and the husband who had brought such happiness into all their lives, she thought back to that desperate day on the Kansas prairie. How close they had come to a very different fate. How a chance encounter with a kind stranger had changed everything. "What are you thinking about?" Lucas asked, noticing her contemplative expression. "I was thinking about how far we've come," Beth replied, "and how grateful I am for you, for this life we've built together." Lucas leaned down to kiss her gently. "It's only the beginning, my love. We have so many years ahead of us." As the seasons turned and the years passed, the Garrison family continued to grow and thrive on the rocking T Ranch. James eventually took over as ranch manager when Lucas was promoted to foreman. Sarah married the local schoolteacher and raised her own family nearby. Daniel fulfilled his childhood dream of becoming a skilled rancher, working alongside his father and older brother. Emma discovered a talent for healing and became the unofficial nurse for the ranch community. The twins, Michael and Mary, though different in many ways, both inherited Lucas's love of horses and became accomplished riders. Abigail, who had no memories of life before the ranch, grew into a vivacious young woman with her mother's strength and her adoptive father's kindness. And little Will, joined by 2 more siblings in the years that followed, never knew anything but the security of a loving family and the freedom of ranch life. For Beth and Lucas, the love that had begun with a chance encounter on the prairie only deepened with time. Through the challenges of raising their large family, the hardships of ranch life, and the inevitable sorrows and joys that filled their days, they remained steadfast in their devotion to each other. "I never thought I could be this happy," Beth told Lucas on their 20th wedding anniversary as they sat on the same porch swing where they had shared so many quiet moments over the years. "Neither did I," Lucas admitted, his hair now streaked with silver but his eyes still bright with love when he looked at his wife. "That day when I saw you on the prairie, too weak to stand, with those 7 children around you, I had no idea I was riding toward my future." "You saved us," Beth said simply. Lucas shook his head. "No, my love, we saved each other." As the sun set over the Montana hills, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Beth rested her head on her husband's shoulder, content in the knowledge that the desperate mother and the kind cowboy had found in each other not just rescue, but a love that would sustain them for all their days.